Hello and welcome to Inside Modular, the podcast of commercial modular construction, brought to you by the Modular Building Institute. My name is John McMullen. I'm the marketing director here at MBI, and today I'm joined by Landon Boucher and Shawn Lothrop of Innovative Structural Engineering. They're here today to talk about the ins and outs of structural engineering for modular buildings. Landon and Shawn, how are you doing today?
Great. How are you today?
I'm feeling good. I am feeling good. So in a nutshell, let's kick this thing off. In a nutshell, what is structural engineering?
Yeah, thanks, John. This is Landon. So, really, in a nutshell, structural engineering, it's a little bit of an art and a science, probably more science than it is art. But it's a portion of the design that involves what are typically the unseen elements of the building, the structural shell, or what is sometimes referred to as the bones of a building. And I say that it's a little bit of an art because there's solutions that we can come up with, right? But that we know just from our own perspective as structural engineers. But we're working on a project. We're working on that project with a whole team of people, and there's different needs and understandings that each person on that team brings to the table. And so sometimes the art is involved with the creativity and coming up with a solution that fits everybody.
And hey, John, this is Shawn. So to add to that a little bit too, is on a more technical side, we're actually designing the building to meet two specific types of loading. So basically gravity loading, so making sure the building isn't going to fall down due to gravity and looking at that. And then we're also looking to provide a lateral system design. So if your building is hit with large wind loads or large amounts of seismic load, the building isn't going to fail in that manner and stay standing. So that's kind of a summary.
Gotcha. Thank you. So, Landon, you mentioned that there's a team at work here. So what is the structural engineer's role in the project? Where do you fit in that team?
Yeah, that's a great question, and so I'm going to have Shawn expand on this a little bit, but, we get asked that question, from time to time, and I always phrase it, and really it comes down to three parts, really. Number one, it's to listen, right? That's how it starts off, where we want to listen, understand the customer's objectives for that project. Number two, we want to present the options, right, on how to achieve those objectives. And then number three, we want to coordinate effectively to ensure the desired outcome for whatever project it is that we're working on at that moment. But specifically when it comes to sort of the nuts and bolts, if you will, for what our role is, I think I'd like Shawn to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, no, thank you. So we're basically creating, if it's a wood structure, we're creating a wood framing plan to show how to build the structure. At the foundation level, we're creating a foundation plan that shows, how thick the concrete should be, where the rebar should be located, where the anchor embed should be. So we're basically creating a plan set and then a calculation set to go along with it to submit to the jurisdictions that allow or it gives a guideline for the builder to know how to put the structure together to be able to resist certain types of loading.
And so I have to imagine there are some differences between plans and designs that you would make for a modular building as opposed to a traditionally built building. I was wondering if you could go into that a little bit.
Yeah, so this is Shawn again. I can comment on that. So really, I think a lot of people are maybe get scared by the term modular or volumetric modular or panelization and that, but realistically, modular buildings are built with the same materials as traditional site-built structures. The main difference is that the configuration of the materials. So, a modular structure would be built with maybe a floor and a roof on the volumetric piece with framing and detailing being different and the attachments to certain parts of the structure being different. But overall, the materials themselves are very, very similar to the traditional site-built construction. It's just more of a configuration change in how they're put together.
Thanks, Shawn. I got another question for you. What process do you use when you're working on a modular project? Is it any different than you would normally use? Do you use specific software, specific strategies when you design for modular?
So realistically, the design or the process of designing a modular building is very similar to a traditional site-built structure. As far as the structural engineer's view into the project of the way we approach it is very similar to the traditional. I guess, like I said previously, the only difference is really just understanding maybe each factory's needs and factory configurations and knowing how to deal with specific materials. Different factories build different ways. So Factory A may build all out of steel, and we have steel moment frames and steel brace frames and a different foundation configuration, where Factory B may be all wood, and we're so it's really understanding the factory's needs and kind of approaching it that way, and really that's the biggest process difference, I guess, between modular and traditional. Yeah.
And you speak of the factory's needs. At what point in the process do you start working with the factory? I imagine it has to be pretty early on.
Yeah, I mean, we like to get going. I mean, that's honestly one of the first questions we typically ask is who is the builder, who's the factory, so that we can, if we haven't worked with them already, try to get up to speed on what their system is and how they like to build. And every factory is geared differently to be able to build efficiently in a certain way. So knowing that up front is really a key.
Yeah, the earlier the better.
Gotcha. So I have a question. You mentioned earlier, I think it was Shawn, that we don't want the buildings to fall down. Of course we don't. Outside of that, how would you judge your success on a project? What would make you say, hey, I did a good job on that project?
Yeah. Hey, John, this is Landon again. I think there's a number of factors involved with what we believe constitutes success in a project, right? Obviously, our main objective, right, is to make sure that we're creating a plan set that is in line with the building code and is structurally sufficient and buildable, right? That's really the key thing, is it buildable? But ultimately, what I think really matters is what the customer believes. And so when a customer comes back and asks us to work with them again or refers us to a colleague of theirs, that's how we know that we've succeeded on a project. And to that end, that's really been, I think, the key factor in our growth over the past 15 years or so, has been that sort of word of mouth marketing. And maybe Shawn might want to touch on that a little bit as well. But
yeah, I mean, I think that for me on the technical side of things too, of looking at success for me would be, one, delivering a plan set and everything on time to the client and making sure that it's well coordinated. So especially with modular buildings, we want to make sure that the engineers are all talking to each other, whether it's mechanical, electrical, structural. All those people know where their systems are going, and we have that well coordinated, and coordinating with the factory also, making sure that we understand how the structure is being built. And so if all of that is happening up front, then there's no major delays on the project, there's no major changes, everything is smooth, it gets delivered on time. So ultimately, we're all trying to get the product to the owner on time and deliver it, as promised. So if we have a successful project, then it's plans delivered on time, well coordinated set, and ultimately the build of the mods have arrived on time, and we've done what we promised, that's really it.
That's well said.
I have a question about your role within the team, and we touched on this earlier, and something about your last response sort of sparked it in my head again. With whom in the team do you work most closely with? Is it the factory? Do you interface a lot with the architects? Who do you work most closely with when developing the plans for a building?
Yeah, Shawn again can touch on this a little bit as well, but really depends on that project. So sometimes when we are contacted to bring on board as part of a design team, sometimes we are contracted directly with an architect. Sometimes that's with the developer, and sometimes it's directly with the factory. So ultimately, that's our customer is really everybody, right, that we're interfacing with. But our number one customer is the person that we've contracted with on a project, and so it really varies from project to project. But the two key people that we're going to be interacting with the most in general is going to be the architect and the factory. We're still going to be interfacing with all the other sub-consultants, and even the site construction teams, all of that. But the two main are going to be the architect and the factory.
Landon's correct. I mean, the way we interact with the architect and the factory is key. Maybe what some people don't understand is that there's a factory component, and then there's a site component to this type of building, and we may have a different architect on a portion of the building, but for the most part, there's usually one architect, one factory, and we're working with those two groups to get everything done. But there could be an owner's rep too that we're also typically working on maybe site-built structures and different things that aren't part of the factory process. That way there's one engineer on a product and we're not bringing in multiple people to do similar designs. What we've found is it's really efficient to make sure that you have the same engineering team for the factory, for the site portion, for even the site walls or site trellises and that. That way there's an understanding from that one engineer of how the whole project goes together. So, that's kind of real critical.
That's a really, really good point.
Yeah.
So do you guys get to go on site as well as, your design work in your offices? Do you get to go everywhere the project goes, or are you stuck behind a desk all day?
No, we do. So the code requires specific parts where we actually have to observe the construction. Not necessarily the factory construction, but some of the site construction, depending on the jurisdiction, we'll have to be out to observe, say, rebar and trenches prior to concrete pour, or we'll have to observe any of the site work framing being done, or any of the framing or steel work done on site. So there's depending on the size of the building, the seismic design categories, the jurisdiction requirements, we may have to be on site very often. And then there's some projects we don't have to be there at all. So it really depends. But yeah, we're there, usually there quite a bit. Yeah. So
tell me more about the value proposition that modular or off-site constructions brings specifically to the structural engineer.
Yeah, this is Landon again. That's a great question, and honestly, that's a question that we don't really get too often. I think that the industry, speaks obviously very well about the value proposition of modular in general, particularly to a building developer. But when it comes to design consultants, specifically the structural engineer, for us, right, our product is our plan set, right? That's our product. And so I think the inherent nature of modular or off-site construction provides us with the process of, streamlined and thorough coordination with all the various stakeholders involved. And so that really puts us in an optimal position to provide a product or a plan set that represents our team in the most positive light.
And to add to that, John, this is Shawn again. One of the benefits that we really love as the structural engineers is that the product is built in a factory-controlled environment.
Yeah.
And it's built in the same systematic way, usually on every project, depending. Like a factory will have one way to build, and they usually try to follow that. So you'll get factories that have done this over and over and over with different types of structures in a controlled environment. So we feel like the product can be superior to traditional built structures where you don't have a controlled environment you're building, and maybe the lumber and the materials out in the sun or the weather and that. These are well-controlled environments that produce a great product. So that's a big value item for us, because we feel like the final end product is solid.
It's a great point.
So what do traditional engineers need to know before trying their hand at modular?
Basically, modular differs from traditional structures in that there's a configuration difference of how the projects go together, and the biggest challenge for an engineer coming into modular is really knowing what each factory, how they want to build, and what their methods of construction are. So it's really more or less trying to get up to speed on how the configurations are put together and how the factory wants to build, as every factory has their own method of production and that, and really just getting up to speed on what they're doing is a big major item. Other than that, the buildings really are designed very similar to site-built structures, and similar methods as far as lateral and gravity resistance of the building. But yeah.
Speaking of methods, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. We all have our methods of working, and they have all been disrupted here of late. I was wondering how COVID-19 has affected your ability to do your job. Has it affected that of your team? Have you had to change how you've worked with any of the other factories that you've dealt with? I was wondering if you could tell me about that.
COVID-related stuff, really, we've just seen a little bit of reduction in business, not much. I mean, it's maybe been 5-10% of our workload, and I think that's expected really with everything that's going on. But honestly, our biggest change with all of this is that we're working remotely. I mean, all of our engineers are at their homes working, and I feel like we're still able to coordinate really well, and we're able to work with the factories and stay in communication like we normally would. Obviously, there's going to be a few hiccups here and there, but for the most part, we're doing well.
Excellent.
I think it was a little bit, maybe a little bit rougher in the beginning, but after a couple of weeks, everybody really got situated and kind of found their sweet spot in how to operate remotely. So
I'm glad to hear it.
Gotten a lot better.
I'm glad to hear it. How did you both touched on this a little bit earlier? How did you get started in modular engineering? What drew you to the field?
Actually, it was when I worked at this is Shawn again. It was when I worked with a different firm. We got introduced to kind of modular techniques. We started working a little bit with Bar Vista Homes, mainly in California, a little bit in Colorado. And then from there, after I started my own firm, we basically got into a little bit of work with Michelle Kaufman, and just through referrals and different things like that, we've ended up working with probably about a dozen or more factories all around the U.S. And it was interesting to learn of the concept as a young as a younger engineer at that time, but to learn the different techniques that are out there and methods of construction, we've really bought into modular as a great technique.
And can you tell me about a project that you're working on now, or maybe 2 or 3 projects if you can?
Yeah, just briefly. I mean, two of the bigger projects we're working on right now. We have a couple of projects in LA County, and one is the Martin Luther King building. It's a social services building in LA County. It's a 3-story steel building with brace frames, moment frame structure, concrete floors, metal deck. It's a very interesting project. And then for LA County, also we have another project at the UCLA Medical Center campus in Oliveview. And it's basically, I want to say, 7 buildings that are all mainly steel framed. They have some wood elements to them, but very similar buildings to the MLK project, where they're 2-3-story steel framed and with some portions of wood. But yeah, they're great projects. And Landon can probably comment about a couple other residential and different things.
No, thanks, Shawn. I think those projects are probably the most high-profile ones that we have going on right now. They're just getting a lot of attention from just local, politicians and that sort of thing within and around the LA area. So it's really great to be involved with those and the impact that they're going to have on the community. So definitely thankful for the opportunity that the factory brought to us. Other than that, we've got several hospitality projects, some multifamily, affordable housing, and then, of course, some other like civic-related projects kind of spread throughout the western states. So obviously, as a structural engineering firm, we do a lot of different types of work. Sometimes it's seismic retrofits, it could be renovations, it could be parking structures, and we have other stuff that's traditional site-built stuff. So, but the modular has been something that I think, particularly over the last few years, we've just really seen the interest level and the demand really continue to grow, and it's been great to be a part of that, kind of coming in, like Shawn said, in the early sort of stage of the volumetric modular concept, and then being a part of riding that wave of success along with the factories. So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, and one thing, this is Shawn again, I'd like to add is that a big chunk of our work too is custom residential homes. I mean, there's a big market out there for, or a lot of the factories are building very high end. A lot of stuff up in the Lake Tahoe area. There's a lot of really high-end homes in the Bay Area that are being built modular. So it's very unique how modular structures can be adapted to any type of architecture. A lot of people think modular needs to be a boxy building that is, you can see that it's a modular building. And I would challenge some people to even recognize that some of these buildings are modular after they're built. So. It's a very unique process. I mean, we highly recommend anyone looking to build modular to explore it and go down that road.
That's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up at the end. It is really getting difficult to tell the difference, and it sounds like you guys have been staying very busy. I'm thrilled to hear that. I just wanted to say thank you both for coming on, Landon and Shawn from Innovative Structural Engineering. We look forward to having you as MBI members for a long time to come. Thank you again.
Thank you. We're glad to have the opportunity. Thanks, John.
Yeah, we appreciate it, John. Thank you.
All right, my pleasure. This has been John McMullen from Inside Modular, the podcast of commercial modular construction, brought to you by the Modular Building Institute. Until next time, thank you.